Marcus Sullivan adjusted his designer tie as he walked through the glass doors of Henderson and Associates, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in downtown Chicago. At 28, he had already climbed higher than most of his peers, and he made sure everyone knew it. His expensive Italian leather shoes clicked against the marble floor as he made his way to the elevator, nodding curtly at the receptionist who greeted him with a polite smile. The elevator doors opened to reveal a young woman in her mid-20s, dressed in what Marcus immediately dismissed as discount store clothing. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried a worn leather briefcase that had seen better days. She looked up from her phone and offered a friendly smile as Marcus stepped into the elevator. "Good morning," she said cheerfully, pressing the button for the 15th floor. "Beautiful day outside, isn't it?" Marcus glanced at her briefly, taking in her appearance with barely concealed disdain. He had seen her type before, probably some junior assistant or intern trying to make conversation with her betters. He didn't bother to respond, instead pulling out his own phone and scrolling through his emails with exaggerated importance. The woman didn't seem bothered by his cold reception. She continued to stand quietly, occasionally glancing at the floor numbers as they climbed. When the elevator stopped at the 12th floor, Marcus expected her to get off. Surely someone dressed like that couldn't be going to the executive floors. But she remained, and the elevator continued its ascent. When they reached the 15th floor, both Marcus and the woman stepped out. Marcus was puzzled, but assumed she was probably making a delivery or had some menial task to perform. The 15th floor was where the senior partners had their offices, and Marcus had been summoned for an important meeting about a potential promotion to junior partner. As they walked down the hallway, Marcus noticed the woman seemed to know exactly where she was going. She walked with quiet confidence, greeting several employees by name as she passed. Some of the staff members seemed genuinely happy to see her, which Marcus found odd. In his experience, people were only friendly to those who could benefit them professionally. Marcus arrived at the conference room where the meeting was scheduled to take place. Through the glass walls, he could see several senior partners already seated around the polished mahogany table. His pulse quickened with anticipation. This was it, his moment to shine and secure the promotion he had been working toward for months. He straightened his jacket and was about to knock on the door when he noticed the same woman from the elevator approaching. She walked past him without acknowledgement and opened the conference room door with casual familiarity. "Sorry, I'm running a few minutes late," she said to the room. Traffic was heavier than expected. Marcus watched in growing confusion as she took a seat at the head of the table, the chair typically reserved for the most senior person in the room. The other partners greeted her warmly, and one of them, Richard Henderson himself, stood to pull out her chair. "Not a problem at all, Catherine," Mr. Henderson said with obvious respect. "We were just discussing the Morrison account while we waited." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Catherine? He racked his brain, trying to place where he might have heard that name before. And why was she sitting in the power position at the table? A secretary approached Marcus and gestured for him to enter. "Mr. Sullivan? They're ready for you now." Marcus walked into the room on unsteady legs, his earlier confidence evaporating. He took the only remaining seat, which happened to be directly across from the mysterious woman named Catherine. She looked up as he sat down, and, for the first time, he noticed her eyes, sharp, intelligent, and quietly assessing. Marcus," said Mr. Henderson. "I'd like you to meet Catherine Morrison. She's the founder and CEO of Morrison Strategic Solutions, our largest client. Catherine, this is Marcus Sullivan, one of our promising junior associates." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Morrison Strategic Solutions, he had been working on their account for months, analyzing their business strategies and preparing reports. But he had never met the CEO in person, and he had somehow assumed it would be a man. The company was worth over $2 billion, and here was its founder and leader, the same woman he had just snubbed in the elevator. Catherine extended her hand with a polite smile. "Nice to meet you, Marcus. I believe you've been working on some of our recent projects." Marcus shook her hand, his palm embarrassingly damp with perspiration. "Yes, Ms. Morrison. It's an honor to meet you. Please, call me Catherine," she said graciously. "I've been looking forward to meeting the team that's been handling our account. Richard speaks very highly of your analytical skills." Marcus managed a weak smile, but, inside, his mind was racing. How could he have been so wrong? How could he have made such a massive mistake in judgment? He thought about his dismissive behavior in the elevator, his refusal to even acknowledge her greeting, and felt sick to his stomach. The meeting proceeded with discussions about various strategic initiatives, but Marcus found it difficult to concentrate. Every time Catherine spoke, he was struck by her obvious intelligence and deep understanding of complex business concepts. She asked probing questions that revealed insights he hadn't considered, and she articulated her company's vision with clarity and passion. At one point, she referenced a report that Marcus had prepared the previous week. The analysis of our Eastern European expansion was particularly thorough, she said, looking directly at him. The risk assessment section showed real strategic thinking. Marcus should have felt proud, but instead, he felt smaller than ever. She was complimenting work he had done for her company while having no idea that he had treated her so rudely just minutes earlier. The irony was not lost on him. As the meeting progressed, Marcus began to understand why Morrison Strategic Solutions was Henderson and Associates' largest client. Catherine Morrison wasn't just wealthy, she was brilliant. Her company had grown from a small startup to a multinational corporation under her leadership. She had been featured on the covers of major business magazines and was regularly invited to speak at industry conferences. During a brief break in the meeting, Marcus excused himself to go to the restroom. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, horrified by his earlier behavior. He had built his career on being able to read people and situations quickly, yet he had catastrophically misjudged the most important person in the room. When he returned to the conference room, he noticed Catherine was reviewing some documents on her tablet. She looked up as he sat down, and, for a moment, their eyes met. There was something in her expression, not anger or contempt, but perhaps a flicker of recognition. Did she remember his rudeness from the elevator? The meeting continued for another hour, with Catherine providing detailed feedback on various proposals and strategic recommendations. Marcus contributed when asked, but he felt like he was performing poorly compared to his usual standards. His confidence had been shattered, and it showed in his hesitant responses and lack of the assertiveness he was known for. Toward the end of the meeting, Mr. Henderson brought up the topic that Marcus had been hoping to discuss, his potential promotion. Catherine, we're considering promoting Marcus to junior partner. He's shown exceptional promise, and his work on your account has been exemplary. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. The quality of work has certainly been impressive, but you know how much I value not just technical skills, but also character and interpersonal abilities. Those qualities are crucial for senior positions. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. Was she making a subtle reference to their elevator encounter? He couldn't be sure, but her choice of words seemed pointed. Absolutely, Mr. Henderson agreed. Character is paramount in our business. Trust and respect are the foundation of everything we do. The meeting concluded with handshakes and pleasantries. As Catherine gathered her things, she approached Marcus directly. It was interesting to meet you today, Marcus, she said with a polite but unreadable expression. I hope we'll have the opportunity to work together more closely in the future. Marcus nodded, still struggling to find his voice. Yes, Ms. Morrison. Catherine, I look forward to it as well. She smiled, a smile that was perfectly professional, but somehow left Marcus feeling even more unsettled. I'm sure you do, she said quietly before turning to leave. After Catherine and the other senior partners had left the room, Marcus remained seated, staring at the polished surface of the conference table. His reflection looked back at him, distorted and wavering. He had entered this meeting expecting to discuss his promotion and his bright future with the firm. Instead, he was left questioning everything he thought he knew about success, judgment, and the importance of treating every person with respect. The irony was crushing. For months, he had been working diligently on the Morrison account, crafting strategies and recommendations for a company whose leader he had just treated like she was beneath his notice. He had prepared presentations about respecting diverse perspectives and inclusive business practices, while simultaneously demonstrating none of those values in his personal interactions. As Marcus finally stood to leave the conference room, he caught his reflection in the glass wall. The confident, self-assured young executive who had walked into the building that morning was gone. In his place stood someone who was beginning to understand that true success required far more than just ambition and technical skills. He thought about Catherine Morrison's final words to him. I'm sure you do. There had been something in her tone, not quite sarcasm, but certainly not warmth. She knew. Somehow, she had recognized his earlier dismissal of her, and now she was in a position to influence his career in ways he was only beginning to comprehend. Marcus gathered his things and walked slowly toward the elevator. As he waited for the doors to open, he couldn't help but think about the brief conversation that morning, or rather, the conversation that never happened because of his own arrogance. Catherine Morrison had tried to be friendly, had offered a simple greeting about the beautiful day, and he had responded with cold indifference. The elevator arrived, and Marcus stepped inside. As the doors closed, he caught a glimpse of Catherine Morrison walking down the hallway, engaged in animated conversation with Richard Henderson. They were smiling and laughing about something, clearly comfortable in each other's company. Marcus realized he was watching a master class in professional relationships, something he thought he understood, but obviously did not. The ride down seemed to take forever. Marcus replayed every moment of the morning in his mind, from his casual dismissal of Catherine in the elevator to her pointed comments about character and interpersonal abilities. Each memory felt like a small dagger, reminding him of opportunities lost and bridges potentially burned. When the elevator finally reached the ground floor, Marcus stepped out into the lobby feeling like a completely different person than the one who had entered the building just a few hours earlier. The marble floors that had seemed to announce his importance that morning now felt cold and unforgiving beneath his feet. As he walked toward the exit, Marcus passed the receptionist who had greeted him earlier. This time, he actually noticed her name tag, Sarah, and realized he had never bothered to learn her name despite working in the building for over 2 years. How many other people had he overlooked or dismissed in his climb up the corporate ladder? The afternoon sun was indeed beautiful, just as Catherine Morrison had mentioned that morning. But Marcus barely noticed as he made his way to his car, his mind consumed with the magnitude of his mistake and the uncertain future that lay ahead. He had learned a valuable lesson about assumptions and respect, but he feared it might have come too late to save his career prospects. The drive home was a blur of traffic and regret. Marcus found himself wondering what would happen next. Would Catherine Morrison recommend against his promotion? Would she demand that he be removed from her account? Or worse, would she take her business elsewhere entirely, citing concerns about the firm's judgment in personnel matters? As Marcus pulled into his apartment complex, he realized that his entire understanding of power and influence had been fundamentally flawed. He had spent years focusing on titles and appearances, assuming that success could be measured by the cost of someone's clothing or the prestige of their position. But Catherine Morrison had shown him that true power often comes quietly, without fanfare or obvious displays of wealth. She had dressed modestly, carried herself with quiet dignity, and treated everyone she encountered with respect, even him, despite his rudeness. And yet she commanded more real authority than anyone else in that conference room. She was the client that everyone wanted to please, the leader whose approval could make or break careers. Marcus spent the evening staring out his apartment window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. Somewhere out there, Catherine Morrison was probably having dinner with her family or reviewing business proposals, completely unaware of the existential crisis she had triggered in his life. But for Marcus, everything had changed. He had been forced to confront the uncomfortable truth about his own character, and he didn't like what he saw. The next morning arrived with a heavy gray sky that seemed to mirror Marcus's mood perfectly. He had barely slept, spending most of the night replaying the events of the previous day and imagining all the ways his career might be derailed. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Catherine Morrison's polite but knowing smile, heard her carefully chosen words about character and interpersonal abilities. Marcus dressed more carefully than usual, selecting his most conservative suit and tie. He wasn't sure why. Perhaps some subconscious attempt to project humility and professionalism after his spectacular failure in judgment. As he knotted his tie, he caught sight of his reflection in the mirror and was startled by how tired and uncertain he looked. The drive to the office felt like a death march. Every red light seemed to last an eternity, giving him more time to dwell on his predicament. He found himself noticing things he had never paid attention to before. The homeless man at the corner who he had driven past countless times without a second thought, the crossing guard who waved cheerfully at every car, the small family-owned restaurant that had been there for decades but that he had never bothered to try. Had he always been so disconnected from the world around him? Had his ambition blinded him to the humanity of others to such an extent that he couldn't recognize success when it didn't fit his narrow expectations? When Marcus arrived at Henderson and Associates, he noticed that the building looked different somehow. The same marble floors, the same glass elevators, the same impressive lobby, but now it all seemed less important, less meaningful. He realized that he had been using the grandeur of the building as a reflection of his own worth, but yesterday's encounter had stripped away that illusion. Sarah, the receptionist, greeted him with the same warm smile she always offered. "Good morning, Mr. Sullivan." Beautiful day, isn't it? The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. They were almost exactly what Catherine Morrison had said to him in the elevator, and he had ignored them completely. This time, he stopped walking and really looked at Sarah for the first time in 2 years. Yes, it is beautiful, he replied, his voice slightly hoarse. How are you doing today, Sarah? Sarah's eyebrows rose in surprise. I'm doing well, thank you for asking. I hope you have a good day. As Marcus walked toward the elevator, he wondered how many other simple human connections he had missed in his single-minded pursuit of professional advancement. The elevator doors opened, and he half expected to see Catherine Morrison inside, but the car was empty. He pressed the button for his floor and watched the numbers climb, each floor representing another step away from the ground-level humanity he seemed to have forgotten. When Marcus reached his office, he found an email waiting for him from Richard Henderson's assistant. The subject line made his stomach clench. Follow-up meeting required. Morrison account. The message was brief and formal, requesting his presence in Mr. Henderson's office at 10 o'clock that morning. Marcus spent the next hour trying to concentrate on his regular work, but it was hopeless. Every few minutes, he found himself checking the clock, calculating how much time he had left before what might be the most important meeting of his career. He attempted to prepare talking points, to anticipate questions, but his mind kept drifting back to that moment in the elevator when everything had gone wrong. At 9:45, Marcus gathered his files and walked slowly toward Mr. Henderson's corner office. The hallway seemed longer than usual, each step bringing him closer to a conversation that could determine his future with the firm. He knocked on the door and heard Mr. Henderson's voice inviting him in. Richard Henderson was a man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen decades of corporate triumphs and failures. He had built Henderson and Associates from a small consulting startup into one of the most respected firms in the city, and his opinion carried enormous weight in Marcus's world. Marcus, please sit down, Mr. Henderson said, gesturing to one of the chairs across from his desk. I wanted to speak with you about yesterday's meeting with Catherine Morrison. Marcus settled into the chair, his hands gripping the armrests perhaps a bit too tightly. Of course, sir. I thought the meeting went well overall. Mr. Henderson leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus with the expression of someone who had navigated countless delicate business situations. The meeting did go well, Marcus. Your work on the Morrison account has been exceptional, and Catherine was genuinely impressed with the quality of your analysis. Marcus felt a flicker of hope, but Mr. Henderson's tone suggested there was more to the conversation. However, Mr. Henderson continued, Catherine mentioned something that concerns me. She said she had an interesting encounter with you before the meeting. She didn't go into details, but she suggested that it might be valuable for us to discuss the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of their apparent position or status. The hope that had briefly flickered in Marcus's chest died immediately. He felt heat rising in his cheeks as he realized that Catherine Morrison had indeed remembered their elevator interaction, and, more importantly, she had chosen to address it diplomatically rather than demanding his immediate removal from her account. I see, Marcus said quietly, unsure of how much he should admit or deny. Mr. Henderson leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. Marcus, I've known Catherine Morrison for over 10 years. She's one of the most successful entrepreneurs I've ever met, but more than that, she's a person of incredible integrity. If she takes the time to make a comment like that, it's because she sees potential in someone, but wants to help them grow. Marcus felt his throat tighten. The full weight of his mistake was becoming clear, but so was the remarkable grace that Catherine Morrison had shown in how she handled it. She could have destroyed his career with a single conversation, but instead, she had chosen to give him an opportunity to learn and improve. Sir, I think I know what she was referring to, Marcus said slowly. Yesterday morning, before the meeting, we were in the elevator together. I didn't recognize who she was, and I wasn't as polite as I should have been. Mr. Henderson nodded slowly. I appreciate your honesty, Marcus. Can you tell me what happened? Marcus took a deep breath and recounted the elevator encounter in painful detail, his dismissive attitude, his refusal to engage in basic conversation, his obvious judgment based on Catherine's appearance. With each word, he felt smaller and more ashamed, but he forced himself to be completely honest. When he finished, Mr. Henderson was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Marcus, I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. You're incredibly talented, but you've always struck me as someone who might be too focused on status and hierarchy. This incident with Catherine confirms some concerns I've had about your readiness for senior leadership. The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He had thought his ambition and drive were his greatest assets, but apparently, they had also been his greatest weakness. However, Mr. Henderson continued, the fact that Catherine chose to handle this situation with such diplomacy tells me something important. She could have demanded your removal from her account or taken her business elsewhere. Instead, she's giving you a chance to learn from this experience. That suggests she sees something in you worth developing. Marcus felt a complex mixture of gratitude and shame. What happens now, sir? Mr. Henderson stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city. Now you have a choice, Marcus. You can treat this as a minor embarrassment and try to move past it, or you can use it as a catalyst for real personal growth. Catherine Morrison didn't become successful by accident. She understands that true leadership requires humility, empathy, and respect for others regardless of their position. I want to learn from this, Marcus said earnestly. I realize I've been making judgments about people based on appearances and assumptions, and I know that's wrong. Mr. Henderson turned back to face him. Good, because I'm going to give you an opportunity to prove that. Catherine has specifically requested that you continue as the lead analyst on her account, but she's also suggested some additional responsibilities that will require you to interact more broadly with different levels of her organization. Marcus felt a surge of relief mixed with apprehension. What kind of additional responsibilities? Catherine is planning a major expansion into emerging markets, and she wants someone from our firm to spend time at Morrison Strategic Solutions, working directly with her team. It would involve working with everyone from entry-level analysts to senior executives, as well as visiting some of their international offices. The person we assign would need to demonstrate exceptional interpersonal skills and the ability to build trust with people from diverse backgrounds. The implications of the assignment began to sink in. It was simultaneously a tremendous opportunity and a test. Catherine Morrison was essentially giving him a chance to redeem himself while also evaluating whether he could develop the leadership qualities necessary for senior positions. I would be honored to take on that assignment, Marcus said. The decision isn't mine alone, Mr. Henderson replied. Catherine wants to meet with you again before making a final determination. She suggested lunch next week, somewhere casual where you can have a more relaxed conversation about business philosophy and approach. Marcus nodded, though the thought of another one-on-one interaction with Catherine Morrison filled him with anxiety. He knew this lunch would be his opportunity to demonstrate that he had learned from his mistake, but he also knew that one wrong word or gesture could end his career prospects entirely. The rest of the meeting focused on technical details about the Morrison account and expectations for the potential international assignment. As Marcus left Mr. Henderson's office, he carried with him a complex mix of emotions: gratitude for the second chance, shame about his initial behavior, and determination to prove that he could grow from the experience. Over the next few days, Marcus found himself paying attention to his interactions with others in ways he never had before. He made an effort to greet the building maintenance staff by name, to thank the security guards who had been invisible to him for years, and to actually listen when colleagues spoke rather than simply waiting for his turn to talk. The changes felt awkward at first, like trying on clothes that didn't quite fit. Marcus realized that his previous behavior hadn't been consciously malicious. It had simply been thoughtless and self-centered. He had been so focused on his own advancement that he had forgotten to see other people as complete human beings with their own stories, struggles, and value. One afternoon, while working late in his office, Marcus encountered the cleaning woman who serviced his floor. In the past, he would have barely acknowledged her presence, perhaps offering a distracted nod while continuing to work. This time, he looked up from his computer and spoke to her directly. "Good evening," he said. "I don't think we've properly met. I'm Marcus Sullivan." The woman, who appeared to be in her 50s with graying hair and tired eyes, looked surprised. "I'm Maria," she said with a slight accent. "I've been cleaning this floor for about 3 years." 3 years. Marcus felt embarrassed that he had never bothered to learn her name. "I'm sorry I haven't introduced myself before. Thank you for all the work you do. My office is always spotless." Maria smiled, and Marcus noticed how it transformed her entire face. "Thank you for saying that. Most people don't notice." As their brief conversation continued, Marcus learned that Maria had emigrated from El Salvador 20 years earlier, that she worked 2 jobs to support her family, and that she was putting her daughter through college. By the time she moved on to clean the next office, Marcus felt humbled by her story and ashamed of how he had overlooked someone with such strength and dignity for so long. The incident reinforced the lesson that Catherine Morrison had taught him, albeit indirectly. True worth and character had nothing to do with job titles or expensive clothing. Maria, in her uniform and with her cleaning supplies, possessed qualities of perseverance and dedication that Marcus was only beginning to understand. As the week progressed and the lunch meeting with Catherine Morrison approached, Marcus found himself developing a different perspective on success and leadership. He began to see that his previous approach, focusing solely on climbing the corporate ladder while ignoring the human cost, had been not just ethically questionable, but also strategically short-sighted. The most successful leaders, he was beginning to realize, were those who could connect with people at all levels, who could inspire loyalty and respect through their character rather than their position. Catherine Morrison was a perfect example of this principle. She had commanded the respect of everyone in that conference room, not because of her wealth or title, but because of the way she treated others and the integrity she demonstrated. The night before his lunch meeting with Catherine, Marcus lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through possible scenarios and conversations. He knew that this meeting would determine not just his immediate career prospects, but also the kind of person he wanted to become. The Marcus Sullivan who had entered that elevator a week ago was gone forever. The question now was who would replace him. The restaurant Catherine Morrison had chosen for their lunch meeting was not what Marcus had expected. Instead of one of the upscale establishments where business deals were typically discussed, she had selected a small family-owned cafe in a diverse neighborhood about 20 minutes from downtown. The place looked unpretentious from the outside, with hand-painted signs and mismatched outdoor furniture that had seen better days. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early, parking his car and taking a moment to observe his surroundings. The neighborhood was a mix of small businesses, apartment buildings, and community organizations. People of various ethnicities and economic backgrounds moved along the sidewalks, some dressed in business attire, others in work uniforms or casual clothing. It was the kind of area he would normally drive through without stopping, but now he found himself genuinely curious about the community Catherine had chosen for their meeting. He entered the cafe and was immediately struck by the warm atmosphere. The walls were decorated with local artwork, and the scent of freshly baked bread filled the air. A young woman behind the counter smiled at him warmly and asked if he needed help finding a table. Marcus realized this was probably another test. Catherine had deliberately chosen a place where his character and adaptability would be on full display. At exactly 12 o'clock, Catherine Morrison walked through the door. She was dressed casually in dark jeans and a simple blouse, looking more like a neighborhood resident than a billionaire CEO. She scanned the room, spotted Marcus, and approached his table with the same quiet confidence he remembered from their previous encounters. "Thank you for meeting me here," she said as she sat down. "I hope you don't mind the informal setting. I find that business conversations are often more productive when people can relax and be themselves." "Not at all," Marcus replied, though he felt anything but relaxed. "It's a charming place. Have you been coming here long?" "About 5 years," Catherine said, picking up the menu. "I discovered it when Morrison Strategic Solutions was considering opening a community outreach office in this area. The owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, makes the best empanadas in the city, and the coffee is excellent. Plus, I like supporting local businesses whenever possible." As they reviewed the menu, Marcus noticed how Catherine interacted with the staff. When the young woman from the counter came to take their order, Catherine greeted her by name and asked about her studies at the local community college. She remembered details about the girl's life and seemed genuinely interested in her progress. "How are the evening classes going, Isabella?" Catherine asked. "Last time you mentioned you were struggling with accounting." Isabella's face lit up. "Much better. Thank you for asking. I found a tutor through the college program you told me about. My grades have really improved." "That's wonderful news," Catherine said with obvious pleasure. "Keep up the hard work. Education is an investment that always pays dividends." Marcus watched this interaction with growing understanding. This wasn't a performance for his benefit. Catherine genuinely cared about the people in her life, regardless of their position or status. It was a natural extension of the character she had demonstrated in the elevator, the same warmth and respect she had offered him despite his rudeness. After they had ordered their food, Catherine leaned back in her chair and studied Marcus with those sharp, intelligent eyes he remembered from their first meeting. "So, Marcus," she said, "Richard tells me you're interested in the international expansion project. It's a significant undertaking that would require someone to work closely with teams in 6 different countries over the next 18 months. I am very interested, Marcus replied carefully. I believe it would be an incredible learning opportunity, and I'm eager to contribute to Morrison Strategic Solutions' continued success. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. The success of this project will depend heavily on relationship building and cultural sensitivity. We're not just implementing business strategies. We're working with people from very different backgrounds who may have different approaches to communication, hierarchy, and decision-making. Marcus sensed that she was giving him an opening to address the elephant in the room. Ms. Morrison, Catherine, I want to acknowledge something from our first meeting. My behavior in the elevator was unprofessional and disrespectful, and I apologize sincerely. I made assumptions about you based on appearances, and I failed to treat you with the courtesy that every person deserves. Catherine's expression remained neutral, but Marcus thought he detected a slight softening around her eyes. I appreciate your directness, Marcus. Can you tell me what you learned from that experience? Marcus had spent hours preparing for this question, but now that the moment had arrived, he realized that scripted answers wouldn't suffice. He needed to be completely honest about his journey of self-discovery over the past week. I learned that I had built my career on a fundamentally flawed understanding of what success looks like, he said slowly. I thought that climbing the corporate ladder was about projecting authority and maintaining distance from people I perceived as less important. I realized that I was measuring people's worth by superficial markers like clothing, job titles, or social status. Catherine listened without interrupting, her attention completely focused on his words. But more than that, Marcus continued, I realized that my approach wasn't just morally wrong. It was also strategically stupid. By dismissing people based on appearances, I was missing opportunities to learn, to build relationships, and to understand different perspectives. The elevator incident showed me that I had become someone I didn't want to be. And what kind of person do you want to be? Catherine asked. Marcus paused, considering his answer carefully. I want to be someone who sees the potential and value in every person I meet. I want to lead by example rather than by intimidation. I want to build bridges rather than walls. And I want to earn respect through my character and actions, not demand it because of my position. Catherine smiled for the first time since they had begun discussing the incident. Those are admirable goals, Marcus. But wanting to change and actually changing are two different things. How do you plan to translate these insights into concrete behaviors? Before Marcus could answer, their food arrived. Mrs. Rodriguez herself brought their plates to the table, and Catherine introduced Marcus to her with obvious warmth and respect. Mrs. Rodriguez, I'd like you to meet Marcus Sullivan. He works with my consulting firm and might be joining our international expansion team. Mrs. Rodriguez shook Marcus's hand with a firm grip and a genuine smile. Any friend of Catherine's is welcome here, she said. She has been such a blessing to our community. The scholarship program she established has helped so many young people pursue their dreams. After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Marcus looked at Catherine with new understanding. You established a scholarship program? Catherine shrugged modestly. Morrison Strategic Solutions believes in investing in communities where we do business. Education is the foundation of economic opportunity. We've funded scholarships for over 200 students in various cities where we have offices. Marcus realized that this was another piece of the puzzle that made Catherine Morrison such a remarkable leader. She didn't just pursue profit. She understood that businesses had a responsibility to contribute to the broader community. It was a level of thinking that went far beyond anything he had considered in his own career. As they ate, their conversation flowed more naturally. Catherine shared stories about her company's international operations, the challenges of working across cultural boundaries, and the importance of building trust with local partners. Marcus found himself genuinely engaged, asking questions not just to impress her, but because he was truly curious about her experiences. One of the most important lessons I learned early in my career, Catherine said, was that success is not a zero-sum game. When we help others succeed, we create conditions for our own success as well. This is especially true in international business, where relationships and trust are often more important than contracts or legal frameworks. Marcus nodded, thinking about how this philosophy contrasted with his previous approach to business. He had always viewed professional relationships as transactions, opportunities to advance his own interests. But Catherine was describing something more collaborative and sustainable. How do you apply that philosophy when dealing with difficult people or challenging situations? Marcus asked. Catherine smiled knowingly. That's an excellent question, and It gets to the heart of leadership. The real test of character isn't how you treat people who can help you. It's how you treat people who can't do anything for you, or who you might initially find difficult. The comment felt pointed, and Marcus knew it was meant to be. Catherine was giving him another opportunity to demonstrate his understanding of the lessons he claimed to have learned. Like someone you meet in an elevator who you assume isn't important to your professional goals. Marcus said, meeting her gaze directly. Exactly, Catherine replied. True leadership means treating every interaction with respect and dignity, regardless of the circumstances or your assumptions about the other person's role in your life. As lunch continued, Marcus began to understand that this meal was more than just a second chance. It was a masterclass in leadership and character. Catherine was demonstrating through her actions the principles she was describing in their conversation. Her treatment of the restaurant staff, her knowledge of Isabella's educational goals, her investment in community scholarships. All of these reflected a consistent approach to leadership that valued people as individuals rather than just resources. Toward the end of their meal, Catherine leaned forward slightly, her expression becoming more serious. Marcus, I want to be direct with you about something. The international expansion project I mentioned is real, and it is a significant opportunity. But it's also a test. I'm not just looking for someone with analytical skills. I need someone who can represent Morrison Strategic Solutions values in diverse cultural contexts. I understand, Marcus said, and I want you to know that I'm committed to proving that I can be that person. Catherine nodded slowly. I'm willing to give you that opportunity, but with conditions. First, before any international assignment, you would spend 3 months working in various departments within Morrison Strategic Solutions. I want you to understand our company culture from the ground up, working alongside people at all organizational levels. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. This was more than he had dared to hope for. A chance to immerse himself in one of the most successful companies in the industry. Second, Catherine continued, you would participate in a leadership development program that includes extensive training in cultural sensitivity, emotional intelligence, and inclusive management practices. This isn't optional. It's a requirement for anyone who wants to represent our company internationally. I would welcome that training, Marcus said earnestly. And third, Catherine said, her voice becoming even more serious, you would need to demonstrate sustained behavioral change over the next 6 months. I'll be watching how you interact with people at all levels of both organizations. Any evidence that you've reverted to old patterns of behavior will result in immediate removal from the project. Marcus felt the weight of her words. She was offering him an extraordinary opportunity, but she was also making it clear that she would be holding him to the highest standards. I accept those conditions completely, he said. I won't let you down. Catherine smiled, and, for the first time, Marcus felt like she was seeing him as a person with potential rather than just someone who had made a mistake. I believe in second chances, Marcus, she said. But I also believe in accountability. This opportunity is yours to lose or to make the most of. Which one will it be? I intend to make the most of it, Marcus replied with conviction he hadn't felt in years. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Catherine stood and extended her hand. Welcome to the Morrison Strategic Solutions extended family, Marcus. I look forward to seeing who you become. Marcus shook her hand, feeling the firm grip and genuine warmth of someone who had decided to invest in his potential despite his past failings. As they walked toward the exit, he felt a profound sense of gratitude mixed with determination. Catherine Morrison had given him far more than a career opportunity. She had given him a chance to become the person he had always had the potential to be. The drive back to his office felt different than any commute Marcus had ever taken. He found himself noticing things he had never seen before. The people walking on the sidewalks, the small businesses lining the streets, the countless individual stories unfolding around him. He realized that his perspective on the world had fundamentally shifted, and there was no going back to the narrow, self-centered view he had held just a week earlier. When Marcus arrived back at Henderson & Associates, he immediately went to find Richard Henderson to share the news about his acceptance into the Morrison Strategic Solutions project. But first, he stopped at the reception desk to speak with Sarah. Sarah, he said, I wanted to thank you for always being so professional and welcoming. I realize I haven't always been as polite as I should have been, and I wanted you to know that I appreciate everything you do. Sarah looked surprised but pleased. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. That's very kind of you to say. As Marcus walked toward the elevator, he thought about Catherine Morrison's parting words. I look forward to seeing who you become. The question was no longer who he had been, but who he would choose to be going forward. And, for the first time in his life, he was excited to find out 0.3 months had passed since Marcus began his immersion program at Morrison Strategic Solutions. And the experience had been unlike anything he could have imagined. True to her word, Catherine Morrison had assigned him to work in various departments throughout the company, from entry-level positions to management roles. What had initially felt like a demotion had gradually revealed itself to be the most valuable education of his career. His first assignment had been in the company's customer service department, where he spent 2 weeks answering phone calls and handling complaints. The experience had been humbling and eye-opening. Marcus discovered that the people who called with problems weren't just voices on the phone. They were business owners struggling to implement software solutions, entrepreneurs trying to scale their operations, and individuals whose livelihoods depended on the services Morrison Strategic Solutions provided. Working alongside the customer service representatives, Marcus had gained a new appreciation for the skill and patience required to resolve complex issues while maintaining a positive attitude. He watched as his colleagues navigated difficult conversations with grace, finding creative solutions to problems that seemed insurmountable at first glance. One particular call had stayed with him for weeks. An elderly small business owner named Frank had been struggling to understand the new inventory management system his company had purchased. Marcus could hear the frustration and embarrassment in Frank's voice as he explained his difficulties with the technology. In his previous role as a consultant, Marcus might have quickly provided technical instructions and moved on to the next task. But working in customer service had taught him to listen differently. Instead of rushing through a solution, Marcus had spent nearly an hour patiently walking Frank through each step of the process. He discovered that Frank wasn't just struggling with technology. He was worried about his ability to keep his family business competitive in an increasingly digital world. By the end of the call, Marcus had not only solved Frank's immediate problem but had also connected him with additional training resources and support services. "You made my day, young man," Frank had said before hanging up. "It's been a long time since someone took the time to really listen to what I was trying to say." That conversation had crystallized something important for Marcus. He realized that his previous approach to business had focused on efficiency and results while overlooking the human element that made those results meaningful. Every customer, every colleague, every interaction represented an opportunity to make a positive impact on someone's life. His second rotation had been in the company's human resources department, where he worked on recruitment and employee development programs. This assignment had opened his eyes to the complex challenge of building and maintaining a diverse, inclusive workplace culture. He had participated in interview processes, new employee orientations, and conflict resolution sessions. One of his most significant learning experiences had come during a series of interviews for a senior analyst position. Marcus had sat in on interviews with several candidates, including a woman named Priya who had recently immigrated from India and was looking to restart her career in the United States. On paper, her qualifications were impressive, but Marcus noticed that some of his colleagues seemed hesitant about her candidacy. During the post-interview discussion, one of the hiring managers expressed concerns about Priya's communication style, suggesting that her accent might make it difficult for clients to understand her. Marcus felt a familiar discomfort, the same kind of superficial judgment he had once made about Catherine Morrison in the elevator. Drawing on the lessons he had learned over the past few months, Marcus had spoken up during the discussion. He pointed out that Priya's technical knowledge was exceptional, her problem-solving approach was innovative, and her multilingual abilities could be valuable for the company's international expansion. More importantly, he argued, diversity of perspective and background was exactly what Morrison Strategic Solutions needed to serve its increasingly global client base. The hiring committee had ultimately offered Priya the position, and she had quickly become one of the department's most valuable contributors. Her unique insights had led to several breakthrough solutions for international clients, and her mentorship of other immigrant employees had strengthened the company's inclusive culture. For Marcus, the experience had reinforced Catherine Morrison's lesson about seeing potential in unexpected places. He realized that his previous narrow definition of fit had been limiting not just to the people he had overlooked, but to the organizations and teams he had been part of. His third rotation had taken him to the company's International Operations Division, where he had worked with teams managing projects in Asia, Europe, and South America. This assignment had been particularly relevant to his future role in the expansion project, and it had provided him with invaluable insights into the challenges of cross-cultural business communication. Working with the international teams had taught Marcus that effective global leadership required more than just technical knowledge. It demanded cultural sensitivity, patience, and the ability to adapt communication styles to different contexts. He had participated in video conferences with partners in Tokyo, where he learned the importance of allowing time for consensus building and indirect communication. He had worked on proposals for clients in Brazil, where relationship building and personal connection were essential elements of business success. One of his most challenging projects had involved mediating a conflict between the company's office in London and a client in Mumbai. Both sides felt that their concerns weren't being understood, and the relationship was becoming strained. Marcus had spent weeks studying the cultural context of the disagreement, consulting with colleagues who had experience in both markets, and developing a communication strategy that addressed the underlying cultural differences that were fueling the conflict. The breakthrough had come when Marcus realized that the London office's direct communication style was being perceived as dismissive by the Mumbai client, while the Mumbai client's more indirect approach was being interpreted as evasive by the London team. By facilitating a series of video conferences where each side could explain their cultural context and communication preferences, Marcus had helped both parties develop a mutual understanding that ultimately strengthened their business relationship. The success of this mediation had earned Marcus recognition from the international division's leadership, but, more importantly, it had demonstrated to him the practical value of the emotional intelligence and cultural sensitivity training he had been receiving as part of Catherine Morrison's leadership development program. The leadership training itself had been more intensive and challenging than anything Marcus had previously experienced. Rather than focusing solely on traditional business skills like strategic planning and financial analysis, the program had emphasized self-awareness, empathy, and inclusive leadership practices. One of the most impactful exercises had been a 360-degree feedback assessment, where Marcus received anonymous evaluations from colleagues at all organizational levels. The results had been both encouraging and sobering. While his technical skills and work ethic received high marks, several respondents noted that he sometimes seemed impatient or dismissive during meetings, particularly when dealing with ideas that challenged his initial assumptions. The feedback had stung initially, but Marcus had come to appreciate its value. It confirmed that changing his fundamental approach to leadership would require ongoing conscious effort, not just good intentions. He had begun working with an executive coach, Dr. Elena Vasquez, who specialized in helping high-achieving professionals develop greater emotional intelligence. Dr. Vasquez had introduced Marcus to the concept of mindful leadership, the practice of being fully present and aware during interactions with others. She had taught him techniques for active listening, for managing his own emotional reactions, and for creating space for diverse perspectives in group discussions. Leadership isn't about having all the answers, Dr. Vasquez had told him during one of their sessions. It's about creating an environment where the best ideas can emerge, regardless of who contributes them. This philosophy had been put to the test during a strategy session for one of Morrison's Strategic Solutions' major clients. Marcus had been invited to participate because of his analytical background, but he found himself in a room with colleagues from various departments, including several people who were junior to him in terms of experience and organizational hierarchy. In the past, Marcus might have dominated the conversation, eager to demonstrate his expertise and secure credit for any successful outcomes. But applying Dr. Vasquez's teachings, he had instead focused on facilitating dialogue and drawing out insights from others. The breakthrough idea for the client's expansion strategy had ultimately come from Jennifer, a recent college graduate working in the marketing department. Her suggestion about leveraging social media influencers in emerging markets had seemed unconventional at first, but as the team explored the concept together, it had evolved into a comprehensive digital strategy that exceeded the client's expectations. Marcus's role in that meeting had been to ask probing questions, to help the team build on Jennifer's initial insight, and to synthesize the various contributions into a coherent proposal. When the client praised the innovative approach, Marcus had made sure that Jennifer received full credit for her original idea, even though he could have easily claimed the recognition for himself. The experience had shown Marcus that his value as a leader wasn't diminished by elevating others, it was actually enhanced. By creating space for Jennifer's creativity and ensuring she received appropriate recognition, he had not only contributed to a successful outcome, but had also built the kind of inclusive team culture that Morrison Strategic Solutions valued. As his 3-month immersion program neared its end, Marcus reflected on how profoundly he had changed during this period. The transformation hadn't been easy or comfortable. There had been moments of frustration when his old instincts clashed with his new understanding of effective leadership. There had been times when he questioned whether he could sustain the level of self-awareness and intentionality that inclusive leadership required. But there had also been moments of genuine satisfaction and connection that his previous approach to business had never provided. He thought about Frank, the small business owner whose day he had brightened with patient customer service. He thought about Priya, whose successful integration into the company had been partly due to his advocacy during the hiring process. He thought about Jennifer, whose innovative ideas were now being implemented by a major client, because he had chosen to facilitate rather than dominate a strategy session. These experiences had taught Marcus that true success wasn't just about climbing the corporate ladder. It was about the positive impact you could have on the people around you. This realization had fundamentally changed his relationship with ambition itself. He still wanted to advance in his career, but now that desire was motivated by the opportunity to create positive change rather than simply accumulating power and status. The final week of his rotation had been spent in Catherine Morrison's executive office, where he had been given the opportunity to observe high-level strategic planning and decision-making processes. Working directly with Catherine and her senior leadership team had provided Marcus with insights into the complexity of running a multi-billion-dollar global organization. What had impressed him most was Catherine's leadership style during challenging situations. When the company faced a significant operational setback in one of their European offices, Marcus had watched as Catherine navigated the crisis with a combination of decisive action and genuine concern for the affected employees. She had addressed the business implications of the situation while also ensuring that displaced workers received support in finding new positions. Every decision we make affects real people with real lives, Catherine had explained to Marcus after a particularly difficult strategy meeting. That responsibility weighs on me every day, and it should. The moment we start treating our stakeholders as abstract numbers rather than human beings, we lose sight of what business should really be about. This philosophy had permeated every aspect of Morrison Strategic Solutions operations, from their customer service approach to their community investment programs. Marcus had come to understand that the company's financial success wasn't separate from its commitment to social responsibility. The two were inextricably linked. As Marcus prepared for his transition to the international expansion project, he felt both excitement and trepidation. The next phase of his journey would take him to offices in 6 different countries, where he would be responsible for implementing strategies that could affect hundreds of employees and thousands of customers around the world. But, unlike the ambitious young consultant who had entered that elevator 3 months earlier, Marcus now understood that his success would be measured not just by financial metrics, but by the relationships he built, the trust he earned, and the positive impact he could create in each community where Morrison Strategic Solutions operated. The transformation that had begun with Catherine Morrison's quiet lesson in humility was now complete in one sense. But Marcus knew it was also just beginning. True change wasn't a destination. It was an ongoing journey of growth, self-reflection, and commitment to becoming the kind of leader who could make a meaningful difference in the world. 18 months had passed since Marcus first stepped into that elevator and encountered Catherine Morrison. Now, as he stood in the conference room of Morrison Strategic Solutions headquarters, preparing to present the final results of the international expansion project, he barely recognized the person he had once been. The conference room was filled with senior executives, regional directors from 6 countries, and board members who had flown in specifically for this presentation. At the head of the table sat Catherine Morrison, her expression attentive but unreadable as she reviewed the comprehensive report that Marcus and his team had prepared. Marcus looked around the room and felt a profound sense of connection to each person present. Over the past year and a half, he had worked closely with many of these individuals, building relationships that went far beyond professional necessity. There was Dr. Liu from the Shanghai office, whose innovative approach to supply chain management had revolutionized their Asian operations. Beside her sat Carlos from Sao Paulo, whose understanding of Latin American markets had opened entirely new revenue streams for the company. In the back of the room, Marcus noticed Jennifer, the young marketing professional whose social media strategy had evolved into a global digital platform that now generated millions in revenue annually. She had been promoted twice during the expansion project and was now leading the company's worldwide digital marketing efforts. Next to her sat Priya, who had become the head of international client relations, and whose multilingual abilities and cultural sensitivity had been instrumental in securing major contracts across 3 continents. As Marcus began his presentation, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. The international expansion project had been even more complex and challenging than anyone had initially anticipated. It had required not just business acumen and strategic thinking, but also the kind of emotional intelligence and cultural sensitivity that his previous approach to leadership would never have developed. His first international assignment had been to the company's new office in Mumbai, where he had spent 3 months working with local partners to establish operations in the Indian market. The experience had tested every lesson he had learned during his transformation period. Working in a culture that prioritized relationship building and consensus-making had initially frustrated his American instincts for quick decision-making and direct communication. But, remembering Catherine Morrison's teachings about respecting different approaches, Marcus had forced himself to slow down, to listen more carefully, and to understand the cultural context that shaped his Indian colleagues' business practices. The breakthrough had come when he realized that their methodical approach to decision-making actually resulted in more sustainable and widely supported outcomes than his previous style of top-down directive leadership. Working with the Mumbai team had also brought back memories of his interaction with Priya during her hiring process. Seeing talented professionals navigate the challenges of working across cultural boundaries had reinforced his understanding of how easily bias and assumptions could limit an organization's potential. The Indian market had become one of Morrison Strategic Solutions' most profitable regions, largely because the local team's cultural insights had enabled them to develop products and services that truly met their customers' needs. His second major assignment had taken him to Berlin, where Morrison Strategic Solutions was establishing a European headquarters. The German market presented different challenges, with its emphasis on precision, thoroughness, and technical expertise. Marcus had worked with local engineers and consultants who initially viewed him with skepticism, questioning whether an American consultant could understand the complexities of European business culture. Rather than trying to assert his authority or prove his competence through aggressive self-promotion, Marcus had taken a more collaborative approach. He had spent his first month in Berlin primarily listening, asking questions, and learning from his German colleagues. He had discovered that their apparent skepticism wasn't personal. It was a cultural preference for methodical evaluation and proven competence over charismatic leadership. By demonstrating respect for their expertise and taking time to understand their perspective, Marcus had gradually earned their trust. The German team had eventually become some of his strongest allies, appreciating his willingness to adapt his communication style to their cultural norms while still contributing valuable insights from his American business experience. The project in Sao Paulo had presented yet another set of challenges. Brazil's business culture emphasized personal relationships and social connection in ways that were different from both the Indian and German markets. Marcus had learned to navigate complex networking relationships, to understand the importance of family connections in business decisions, and to appreciate the role that social events and informal gatherings played in building professional trust. Working with Carlos and the Brazilian team had taught Marcus about the power of authentic relationship building. Unlike his previous approach to networking, which had been primarily transactional, he had learned to genuinely care about his colleagues as individuals. He had attended their family celebrations, learned about their personal interests and challenges, and discovered that these deeper connections actually made their professional collaboration more effective and enjoyable. Each international assignment had built upon the lessons of the previous ones, creating a comprehensive understanding of global business that went far beyond technical knowledge. Marcus had developed what his executive coach, Dr. Vasquez, called cultural agility, the ability to adapt his leadership style to different contexts while maintaining his core values and principles. The Tokyo office had taught him about the importance of patience and consensus building in decision-making. The London office had shown him how to navigate complex regulatory environments while maintaining innovative approaches to problem-solving. The Sydney office had demonstrated the value of work-life balance and employee satisfaction in driving long-term business success. But perhaps the most significant learning had come from understanding how all these different cultural approaches could be synthesized into a cohesive global strategy. Rather than imposing a single American business model on international markets, Morrison Strategic Solutions had developed a flexible framework that could adapt to local conditions while maintaining consistent quality and values. As Marcus continued his presentation, He shared specific examples of how cultural sensitivity had driven business success. The Indian team's relationship-focused approach had resulted in client retention rates that exceeded industry standards by 40%. The German team's emphasis on technical precision had led to product innovations that were now being adopted across all international markets. The Brazilian team's networking capabilities had opened partnerships that generated over $50 million in new revenue. The key insight from our international expansion, Marcus explained to the room, is that diversity isn't just a moral imperative, it's a business necessity. Each market taught us something different about customer needs, operational efficiency, and innovative problem-solving. By embracing these different perspectives rather than trying to standardize them, we've created a competitive advantage that would be impossible to replicate through any single cultural approach. Catherine Morrison nodded approvingly as Marcus presented the financial results of the expansion. The 6 new international offices had exceeded their revenue projections by 30% in their first year of operation. More importantly, employee satisfaction scores across all international locations were among the highest in the company's history, and customer retention rates had improved significantly compared to previous international ventures. But Marcus knew that the numbers, while impressive, only told part of the story. The real success of the project lay in the relationships that had been built, the cultural bridges that had been created, and the sustainable business practices that had been established in each market. As he concluded his presentation, Marcus reflected on the personal transformation that had made this professional success possible. The arrogant young consultant who had dismissed Catherine Morrison in an elevator would never have been capable of leading this kind of complex, culturally sensitive international project. That person had been too focused on his own advancement, too quick to judge others, and too narrow in his understanding of what effective leadership required. The transformation hadn't been easy, and Marcus knew it was ongoing. There were still moments when his old instincts surfaced, when he caught himself making assumptions or prioritizing efficiency over relationship building. But now he had the self-awareness to recognize these tendencies and the tools to correct them. After the presentation concluded, Catherine Morrison approached Marcus as the other attendees filed out of the room. Her expression was warm and proud, and for the first time since he had known her, she seemed completely relaxed and unguarded. "That was exceptional work, Marcus," she said. "Not just the business results, though those are certainly impressive. I'm talking about the leadership you demonstrated throughout this project." "Thank you," Marcus replied. "I couldn't have done it without the incredible teams we have in each market. This success belongs to all of them." Catherine smiled. "That response right there is exactly why this project succeeded. 18 months ago, you would have taken full credit for these results. Today, you're giving credit where it belongs while still taking appropriate responsibility for your role as a leader." Marcus thought about her observation and realized she was absolutely right. His relationship with success and recognition had fundamentally changed. Rather than seeing achievement as a zero-sum competition where his advancement required diminishing others, he now understood that the most sustainable success came from elevating everyone around him. "I have one more challenge for you," Catherine continued. "The board has approved funding for expansion into 3 additional markets: Nigeria, Vietnam, and Mexico. It's an even more complex undertaking than the project you just completed, and it will require someone who can navigate not just different business cultures, but also different political and economic environments." Marcus felt a familiar surge of excitement, but it was different from the ambition that had once driven him. This wasn't about personal advancement or professional recognition. It was about the opportunity to apply everything he had learned to create positive impact in new communities and markets. "I would be honored to take on that challenge," he said. "When do we start?" Catherine laughed. "First, you're going to take a well-deserved vacation. You've been working nonstop for 18 months, and sustainable leadership requires taking care of yourself as well as others." As they walked out of the conference room together, Catherine stopped and turned to face Marcus. "I want you to know something. When I first met you in that elevator, I saw potential in you that you couldn't see in yourself. But I also saw arrogance and insensitivity that could have derailed your entire career." Marcus nodded, remembering that painful morning with perfect clarity. "The reason I chose to give you a second chance wasn't because I thought you would definitely change," Catherine continued. "It was because I believed you had the capacity for growth if you were willing to do the hard work of examining your own behavior and assumptions." "Why did you believe that?" Marcus asked. "I certainly hadn't given you any evidence that I was capable of change." Catherine smiled. Because when Richard Henderson told me about your reaction to our elevator encounter, how genuinely devastated you were by your own behavior, I realized that your arrogance came from insecurity rather than malice. People who are truly arrogant rarely feel genuine remorse for their actions. But people who are insecure and trying to prove themselves can learn to find security in their values and their impact on others. Marcus felt a deep sense of gratitude as he understood what Catherine had done for him. She had seen past his worst moment to identify his potential for growth, and then she had created the conditions for that growth to occur. You gave me more than a second chance, he said. You gave me the opportunity to become the person I always should have been. Catherine shook her head. I didn't make you into anything, Marcus. I just provided some guidance and opportunities. The hard work of changing your fundamental approach to leadership, that was all you. As they reached the elevator, Marcus couldn't help but smile at the symbolic nature of the moment. The same elevator where his transformation had begun was now carrying them together as colleagues, and, he hoped, friends. There's something else I want you to know, Catherine said as they rode down to the lobby. That first day, when you were so rude to me, I wasn't really offended. I've dealt with plenty of arrogant people in my career, and I've learned not to take their behavior personally. Marcus looked at her in surprise. Then, why did you decide to address it? Because I could see that you were better than your behavior suggested, Catherine replied. And because I know from experience that people who judge others based on superficial characteristics eventually limit their own potential as much as they limit others. I didn't want to watch someone with your talents sabotage their own future. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped into the lobby together. Marcus looked around at the bustling activity, employees from dozens of countries and backgrounds working together, creating solutions for clients around the world. He realized that this diversity and inclusion wasn't just a nice ideal. It was the foundation of everything Morrison Strategic Solutions had accomplished. As they walked toward the exit, Marcus saw Maria, the cleaning woman he had gotten to know during his early days of transformation. She was wiping down tables in the lobby cafe, working with the same quiet dignity he had learned to recognize and appreciate. Maria, Marcus called out. How is Elena's graduation going? Maria's face lit up with pride. She graduated summa cum laude last month. She starts her internship at the engineering firm next week. Thank you for asking. After Maria returned to her work, Catherine looked at Marcus with approval. You remember the details of people's lives. I learned that from watching you, Marcus replied. People aren't just resources or obstacles. They're individuals with their own stories and aspirations. Remembering those details isn't just polite. It's essential for building the kind of relationships that make everything else possible. As they stood outside the building, Catherine extended her hand for what Marcus realized might be the last handshake of his mentorship period. From now on, they would be working together as equals, partners in building something larger than either of them could accomplish alone. Thank you, Marcus said as they shook hands. For seeing potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. For giving me the chance to prove that people can really change. And for showing me what authentic leadership looks like. Catherine smiled. Thank you for proving that my faith in you wasn't misplaced. The work you've done over the past 18 months has made Morrison Strategic Solutions a better company and has improved the lives of thousands of employees and customers around the world. As Catherine walked toward her car, Marcus remained standing in front of the building, looking up at the glass facade that now represented so much more than just corporate success. Somewhere in that building, other young professionals were probably struggling with their own assumptions and limitations, just as he had. He hoped they would find the kind of mentor and opportunity for growth that had transformed his life. The afternoon sun was beautiful, just as Catherine had mentioned on that first morning in the elevator. But now Marcus could truly appreciate its warmth and promise. He had learned that success wasn't about climbing over others to reach the top. It was about lifting others up while discovering the best version of yourself in the process. As he walked to his car, Marcus thought about the new challenges that lay ahead. Nigeria, Vietnam, and Mexico would present unique cultural, political, and economic complexities that would test everything he had learned. But he felt ready for those challenges in a way that the old Marcus never could have been. The transformation that had begun with a moment of profound humiliation in an elevator had become a journey of continuous growth and self-discovery. Marcus Sullivan had learned that true power came not from the ability to dismiss or diminish others, but from the capacity to see potential in everyone and to create conditions where that potential could flourish. And as he drove home through the city streets, passing people from all walks of life pursuing their own dreams and challenges, Marcus understood that his story was just beginning. The real test of his transformation wouldn't be in any single achievement or recognition, but in his commitment to treating every person he encountered with the dignity and respect that Catherine Morrison had shown him, even when he hadn't deserved it. The elevator that had once been the scene of his worst professional moment had become a symbol of possibility and redemption. And Marcus knew that wherever his career took him next, he would never forget the woman who had chosen to see his potential for growth rather than simply his capacity for arrogance, and who had given him the greatest gift of all, the opportunity to become worthy of the trust she had placed in him.